in the time it took me to say that opening sentence, your body just manufactured about 2 million red blood cells.
Which is just wild to think about.
Right. And while you are sitting there listening to this deep dive, your heart is pumping roughly 1.5 gallons of blood every single minute. Your brain is firing off, tens of thousands of electrical impulses across this massive network of 86 billion neurons.
Yeah, and at the same time, your immune system is actively hunting down and destroying mutated cells that could have become cancerous.
Exactly. And you are doing all of this without even having to think about it. So today, we are opening the hood on the most complex piece of machinery you will ever interact with, which is, well, you. Okay, let's unpack this. Our source material today is a remarkably detailed review of Bill Bryson's audiobook, The Body, a guide for occupants.
It's such a great source.
It really is. And our mission today is to answer one staggering question. How does this endlessly chaotic, incredibly vulnerable meat machine actually work at all?
It's funny because it really is the ultimate blind spot for most of us, I mean. You wake up, you pour your coffee, you walk out the door, and you just sort of treat your body like it is just a vehicle.
Yeah, just ferrying your brain from point A to point B.
Exactly. But this source material, it forces a total perspective shift. We are going to examine the sheer mechanical wonder, the invisible wars happening right under your skin, and the surprisingly messy evolutionary duct tape that is basically holding the whole operation together.
And we are leaning heavily into the storytelling aspect today, because the source material specifically reviews the audiobook experience of Bryson's work.
Right, which makes a big difference.
It does. We aren't doing some dry textbook biology lecture. The review highlights how the audiobook format uses eccentric scientists and these bizarre historical medical mistakes to make these massive scientific concepts unforgettable.
Which is so crucial for retention. I mean, when you hear about the devastating consequences of a misunderstood biological process in history, the underlying mechanism suddenly becomes vividly clear.
Yeah, it's impossible to forget.
Exactly.
But before we get to the macro-level failures and all those historical blunders, we really have to start at the absolute foundation.
The cells.
Right. The review points out this staggering reality, that every single human being begins as one single cell.
Just one.
Just one. And that solitary cell divides over and over, eventually developing into an enormous collection of roughly 37 trillion specialized cells.
It's a number so big it's hard to even conceptualize.
It really is. I always try to visualize it like this. Imagine dropping one single brick on the ground. You walk away, and that brick automatically multiplies until it builds a sprawling metropolis.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, but somehow, without a project manager on site, those multiplying bricks know exactly which ones need to stretch out and become the power lines, transmitting electrical signals.
Right, your nerves.
Exactly. And other bricks decide to hollow themselves out to become the plumbing that carries oxygen. Some harden to become the walls, structural support. And they're all doing this while reading from the exact same genetic instruction manual.
And what's fascinating here is the mechanics of how that instruction manual actually operates. That's where the real paradigm shift happens in the book.
Oh, totally.
Because the source makes a point to dismantle that old, outdated metaphor of DNA. People tend to think of DNA as this rigid architectural blueprint.
Right, like a deterministic switch.
Yeah.
You have the gene for a trait, you get that trait.
Exactly. But genetics is vastly more dynamic than a simple cause and effect relationship. DNA is an information storage system, yes, but the way that information is expressed changes constantly based on environmental inputs.
Wait, okay, but if the manual is completely identical in every single cell in my body, how does a cell in the retina of my eye know not to suddenly start growing stomach acid receptors?
That comes down to epigenetics. Epigenetics and gene regulation. The instruction manual is the same, but the bookmarks are different.
Oh, bookmarks. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, cells use these chemical markers, like methyl groups, to essentially glue certain pages of the manual shut. So a liver cell has the instructions for building eye tissue, but those specific genes are locked away. They are silenced.
And the ones that aren't silenced.
The genes that remain accessible are in constant dynamic interaction with your hormones, your nutritional intake, your stress levels. A genetic instruction doesn't exist in a vacuum. It is constantly reading the chemical room, so to speak.
Upregulating or downregulating its output based on what you are experiencing.
Exactly.
Well, speaking of reading the room, there is a detail in the source that completely shatters the illusion of individual identity.
The microbiome.
Yes, microbiome. We think of our bodies as this closed, sterile, isolated fortress. But the reality is that we are outnumbered in our own home.
Vastly outnumbered.
We exist alongside these massive communities of microorganisms. We are carrying around trillions of bacteria, viruses, and fungi.
And some are just along for the ride, sure, but many are deeply integrated into our survival. It fundamentally changes the biological definition of what it means to be human.
It's so creepy, but so cool.
You are not a single organism. You are a walking, breathing, ecological biome. You are a host to trillions of other living things that are directly manufacturing chemicals your body literally needs to survive.
Like what kind of chemicals?
Well, for instance, microbes in your gut synthesize essential vitamins. They break down complex carbohydrates that human enzymes cannot digest, and they even produce a massive portion of your body's serotonin.
See, I have a hard time wrapping my head around that. If these alien microbes are producing neurotransmitters that affect my mood, who's actually in the driver's seat?
That is the million-dollar question.
Like, if I crave a piece of cake, is that my human brain wanting sugar? Or is it a specific colony of gut bacteria sending chemical signals via the vagus nerve because they thrive on refined carbohydrates?
It is a profound existential question, and biology suggests it is actually a combination of both. You cannot separate human physiological function from the microbial ecosystem driving it.
We are just a negotiated partnership.
A very complex partnership, yes.
Okay, so what does this all mean? If we are this chaotic, walking ecosystem of trillions of human cells and alien microbes, it really begs the question of infrastructure. How does the background machinery keep this massive city running without us consciously directing traffic?
Because you don't have to consciously remind your stomach to secrete hydrochloric acid.
Right. You don't have to think about expanding your arteries to lower your blood pressure. And the source notes the industrial-scale manufacturing process of digestion. But I want to look at the delivery system.
The cardiovascular system.
Yes. Let's talk about the cardiovascular system because we take it entirely for granted.
We really do. The cardiovascular system is the ultimate demonstration of automated, interdependent complexity. People just reduce the heart to a mechanical pump.
Just a lump of muscle beating away.
But consider the sheer scale. That biological pump generates enough pressure to push blood through approximately 60,000 miles of blood vessels in your body.
60,000 miles. That is insane.
That is enough plumbing to wrap around the Earth twice. And your heart is forcing liquid through that entire network continuously without a single moment of rest for 80 or 90 years.
But the blood itself isn't just passive water moving through pipes either. It's doing an insane amount of heavy lifting.
Oh, absolutely. The blood is an extraordinarily sophisticated delivery and waste removal network. While the plasma transports nutrients and hormones, the red blood cells are executing this brilliant feat of chemistry.
Right, with hemoglobin.
Yes.
Yeah.
They carry a protein called hemoglobin, which binds to oxygen in the lungs. But here is the genius of the mechanism. How does the hemoglobin know when to let go of the oxygen?
Yeah, how does it know where to drop it off?
It relies on the Bohr effect. When muscles are working hard, they produce carbon dioxide, which makes the surrounding tissue slightly more acidic.
Okay, so the acidity changes.
Exactly. That slight change in acidity physically alters the shape of the hemoglobin molecule, forcing it to drop its oxygen payload exactly where it is needed most.
That is incredible. It's an automated supply chain that reads localized demand just based on acidity.
It's a flawless chemical sensor.
And getting that oxygen into the blood in the first place is another unconscious miracle. The review highlights the lungs, which I have to say completely shift how you think about breathing.
Breathing feels so effortless.
Right, you just inhale air into two empty balloons in your chest.
Yeah.
But physiologically, the lungs are not hollow balloons at all.
No, they are more like incredibly dense, intricate sponges.
Right, and they end in these microscopic air sacs called alveoli. The source points out that if you were to unfold and flatten out all the tiny air sacs in your lungs, the surface area would cover roughly the size of a tennis court.
A tennis court inside your chest.
You have a tennis court's worth of surface area folded up inside your ribcage, just so that the barrier between the outside air and your bloodstream is only one single cell thick.
And that ultra-thin barrier is what allows oxygen to slip into the blood and carbon dioxide to slip out instantly.
It's mind-blowing.
And of course, all that infrastructure has to be protected and supported by the skeletal system, which is another thing we misunderstand. People often view the skeleton as this inert scaffolding, like the steel girders of a skyscraper.
But the bones are actually violently active. The logistics of just standing up from a chair are mind-boggling. Bones are living, breathing tissues constantly remodeling themselves. They act as mineral banks, storing calcium and phosphorus, and they release them into the bloodstream when the body runs low.
The mechanism of that remodeling is fascinating. You have specialized cells called osteoclasts that are constantly moving through your bones, dissolving and breaking down old microscopic fractures.
Like a little demolition crew.
Exactly, and trailing right behind them are osteoblasts, which lay down fresh new bone tissue.
The construction crew.
Right. If your body wasn't constantly tearing down and rebuilding your skeleton, the micro damage from just walking around would accumulate. Your bones would eventually become brittle and just shatter.
So all of this underlying infrastructure, the oxygen exchange, the blood pressure regulation, the bone remodeling, it requires an incredibly powerful conductor to coordinate it all.
The brain.
Which brings us to the brain. But here's the grand paradox of the human body that the source material really dwells on. The part of us that is doing the investigating is actually the part we understand the least.
This raises an important question, doesn't it? The brain is the entity studying the brain, and it is running into its own limitations.
It really is.
I mean, the hardware alone is staggering. We are talking about an organ that makes up only about 2% of your body weight, yet it completely monopolizes 20% of your body's entire energy supply just to keep its electrical network firing.
20%. And the review touches on how it controls language, memory, and decision-making. I mean, we can map the physical terrain, right? We could put someone in an fMRI machine and watch the visual cortex light up when they look at a photograph.
We can track calcium channels opening.
Yeah, and we can watch neurotransmitters like dopamine binding to receptors.
But that leads us straight into the hard problem of consciousness. This is one of the deepest philosophical mysteries explored in the book.
It's so fascinating.
We can track all of those physical, chemical, and electrical mechanisms, but tracing an electrical impulse across a synapse does not explain the subjective reality of what you actually feel.
Right.
Science cannot bridge the gap between physical matter and subjective experience.
How does meat learn to think? How does a cascading sequence of sodium ions rushing into a cell translate into the visceral emotional memory of a childhood summer? Or, the sensation of hearing a beautiful piece of music?
It remains a total mystery. We can map the wiring of the machine, but we have absolutely no idea how the machine generates a first-person observer.
It gives this purely biological topic a really deep philosophical weight.
Yeah.
We are literally a mystery to ourselves.
You really are.
But that complexity, those billions of neurons and trillions of cells communicating, it means there are an infinite number of ways for the communication to break down.
Things definitely go wrong.
Let's look at the defense system. When you have a metropolis of 37 trillion citizens, how does the body police them?
The immune system acts as the ultimate border patrol and internal security force. Its most fundamental task is a constant, ruthless game of recognizing self versus not self.
I do want to push back on the idea of this being a perfect security force, though. The review makes it very clear that the immune system is powerful, but it is deeply flawed. It makes catastrophic mistakes.
Oh, absolutely. And the flaws are where we see the mechanics most clearly. I mean, the immune system has cells like macrophages that act as garbage collectors, devouring foreign bacteria.
Right.
It has T cells that hunt down viruses. But the system requires delicate calibration. Sometimes it completely misses a severe threat, allowing a pathogen to multiply.
And sometimes it goes the other way.
Yes. Sometimes it overreacts to something entirely harmless, like pollen or a peanut, triggering a massive, life-threatening inflammatory response. An allergy.
Right.
And sometimes the self versus not self recognition fails entirely. The immune system gets confused and actively starts destroying the body's own healthy tissues. That's what we see in autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis or type 1 diabetes.
But why would an evolutionary process that has been optimizing for millions of years leave us with a security system that actively attacks its own host? That seems like a massive design flaw.
It is a trade-off. To have an immune system aggressive enough to keep you alive in a world teeming with deadly, rapidly mutating pathogens, you have to accept the risk that the weapons might occasionally misfire.
Because the alternative is worse.
The alternative, a weak immune system, would mean immediate death from minor infections.
Wow. Okay, and what happens when the internal citizens themselves go rogue? The source uses cancer as the prime example of a breakdown in normal cellular controls. I always used to think of cancer as this invading force, but it's actually a malfunction of our own rules.
Exactly. Under normal circumstances, human cells have a strict programmed life cycle. They divide, they perform their highly specialized functions, and eventually, when they accumulate too much damage, they undergo a process called apoptosis.
Like apoptosis?
Yes, which is programmed cell death. The cell realizes it is damaged, and it politely dismantles itself for the good of the surrounding tissue.
And cancer just ignores that.
Cancer is what happens when a cell acquires specific genetic mutations that allow it to bypass apoptosis. It ignores the signal to die.
That's terrifying.
And furthermore, it produces an enzyme called telomerase, which rebuilds the protective caps on its DNA. This effectively makes the rogue cell biologically immortal.
So it just keeps dividing.
It just keeps dividing, ignoring all the regulatory stop signs, hoarding nutrients, and crowding out healthy tissue.
So cancer is essentially cellular rebellion. But what about the cells that just follow the rules until the end? What is the actual mechanism of getting older? I hear the analogy all the time that our bodies just wear out like an old car with 200,000 miles on the odometer.
Yeah.
Mechanical friction just grinds the parts down over time.
The car analogy is deeply flawed, actually, because a car cannot repair itself. If you scratch the paint on a car, the scratch stays there forever.
Right.
But if you cut your skin, your body immediately coordinates a massive repair effort to seal the wound and regenerate the tissue. Aging isn't simple mechanical wear and tear. A much better analogy is a photocopy of a photocopy.
A degrading blueprint.
Exactly. Every time your cells divide to replace old tissue, the protective caps on the ends of your chromosomes, the telomeres, get slightly shorter.
Okay.
And eventually the telomeres get so short that the cell can no longer safely divide. It enters a state called cellular senescence.
So it just stops.
The cell doesn't die. It just sits there, no longer functioning properly, and it begins secreting inflammatory chemicals that actually damage the surrounding healthy cells.
Oh, wow.
Combine that with a steady decline in the body's ability to clean up misfolded proteins, and you get aging. Your repair mechanisms simply lose their fidelity over time.
And this vulnerability leads us directly into one of the most fascinating themes in the book. If this machine is so miraculous, if it can balance blood acidity, remodel its own skeleton, and generate consciousness, why is it so prone to these breakdowns?
Right. Why are our backs constantly aching?
Why do we choke on our food? Here's where it gets really interesting. The answer lies in how the human body was engineered, or rather the fact that it wasn't engineered at all.
Right.
Evolution doesn't work like an architect building a custom mansion from scratch. It works like a frantic contractor trying to renovate a two-story house into a skyscraper, using only the materials they found in the basement.
That is the perfect way to look at it. Evolution works strictly by modifying existing structures. It takes whatever anatomy the previous ancestor had and tweaks it to adapt to a new environment.
It's just duct-taping things together.
And because of that blind, iterative process, the human body is full of evolutionary compromises.
The source material uses bipedalism as a massive example of this. Humans decided to stand up on two legs. We got free hands to use tools, which obviously was a huge evolutionary advantage.
Massive advantage.
But we achieved that by taking a spine that was originally designed to act like a horizontal suspension bridge for a four-legged animal, and we just flipped it vertically to act like a load-bearing pillar.
Which is a terrible structural design.
No structural engineer would ever design a pillar shaped like an S and stack all the weight on the lower lumbar vertebrae. That is why so many people suffer from herniated discs and lower back pain. It is a brilliant adaptation, but an incredibly messy mechanical compromise.
And you see the same messy compromise in the human throat.
Oh yeah, the choking hazard.
Yes. In order to develop the complex vocal cords required for advanced language and speech, the human trachea and esophagus had to be positioned incredibly close together.
Right.
The evolutionary cost of being able to talk to each other is that we share a single, narrow tube for both breathing and swallowing food.
It's so dangerous.
It is. A tiny flap of cartilage is the only thing preventing you from inhaling your dinner and choking to death every time you eat. We basically traded safety for communication.
And understanding those messy biological realities is relatively new. The review points out that the history of medicine is essentially a history of humans trying to fix a complex, compromised machine without having any idea how it worked.
It was a lot of guesswork.
So much guesswork. This is where the audiobook storytelling really shines. For centuries, brilliant doctors lacked a basic understanding of infection, cellular anatomy, or microorganisms.
Because they couldn't see the microscopic world, they operated on assumptions that seem entirely bizarre to us now. For nearly 2,000 years, medical consensus was driven by the theory of humorism.
The four humors.
Right, the idea that the body was filled with four distinct fluids or humors in all disease was just an imbalance of those fluids.
Which led to some incredibly dangerous medical interventions. The story of George Washington is a chilling example of this in the book.
It really is.
When Washington developed a severe throat infection, the most elite, highly trained doctors of his era didn't give him antibiotics because, well, they didn't exist. Instead, following the absolute best medical science of the day, they decided to balance his humors by bleeding him.
Yeah.
They systematically drained roughly 40% of his blood volume over a few hours.
They're trying to cure him, and instead, they rapidly accelerated his death through extreme blood loss.
And the tragedy is that they were acting logically based on the flawed paradigm of their time. The review highlights another massive historical blind spot, too, the resistance to germ theory.
Oh, this one is infuriating.
We look at hand washing as the most basic element of hygiene today. But in the 19th century, a physician named Ignaz Semmelweis noticed that women were dying in maternity wards at horrific rates. He realized that doctors were performing autopsies on diseased corpses in the morgue and then walking directly up to the maternity ward to deliver babies without washing their hands.
They were unknowingly carrying deadly pathogens directly into open wounds. And when Semmelweis suggested that doctors should wash their hands with a chlorinated solution, the medical establishment was insulted.
Insulted because they were gentlemen.
Exactly. The idea that a gentleman doctor's hands could be unclean offended their sensibilities.
It took decades and a mountain of unnecessary deaths before the medical community accepted that invisible microorganisms were the true cause of infection.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the overarching lesson of these historical blunders is that human knowledge must constantly adapt. The history of medicine is a testament to generations of scientists and physicians who are willing to challenge bizarre, deeply entrenched assumptions.
They had to follow the evidence.
They had to rely on improving technology, like the microscope, to realize that a microscopic mutation, a single molecule, or an invisible bacterium can dramatically alter the entire body. Our understanding of the body evolved just as the body itself evolved.
So as we wrap up this incredibly expansive deep dive, let's pull all of these threads together. What are the core, actionable takeaways from this massive guide to the human body?
There's a lot to process.
There is. First, the sheer scale of the automated infrastructure is vastly more complicated than it appears. What looks like a simple breath or a heartbeat relies on trillions of cells executing highly coordinated chemistry.
Absolutely.
Second, despite mapping the human genome and understanding the mechanics of cells, science still has massive glaring blind spots, particularly when trying to explain how physical biology generates human consciousness.
The hard problem.
The hard problem. And third, we are not perfectly engineered machines. We are the result of millions of years of evolutionary compromises, vulnerable to internal breakdowns and aging.
It is deeply humbling. You realize that sheer survival is a daily, microscopic victory.
It really is. And touching briefly on the review of the audiobook itself, it gave it a stellar 4.9 out of 5 rating.
That's a great score.
Yeah. The reviewer does offer a slight warning for prospective listeners, though. Because the book is so broad in its ambition, attempting to cover almost the entire human body, you might not get a granular, textbook-level deep dive into every single isolated organ.
Makes sense.
And frankly, the information density is so high that you might need to pause the audio frequently just to let the scale of the biology sink in. Plus, obviously, this is popular science designed for engagement, not a substitute for sitting down with your actual doctor.
Of course.
But its ultimate strength is translating incredibly dense, complicated cellular biology into unforgettable historical narratives. It is highly recommended for a long drive.
But the real beauty of unpacking a topic like this is how intimately it connects to your immediate present moment experience.
Yes, exactly.
Think about the physiological reality of what is happening right now. Every single heartbeat pumping oxygenated blood to your brain during this deep dive. Every breath you have taken while listening to us, utilizing that tennis court's worth of surface area in your lungs.
That's all happening right now.
Every thought you are processing and every movement you make as you stand up and go about the rest of your day is a coordinated biological miracle happening in the background. The ultimate takeaway from this source material is crystal clear. You do not need to look up at the stars or travel to another planet to discover something extraordinary. The most complex, fascinating universe we know of is already inside you.
I love that, the universe under the skin. And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about your day. We learned from this source that our bodies are full of evolutionary compromises, and that past medical truths, like draining George Washington's blood to cure a throat infection or doctors refusing to wash their hands, they now look like bizarre, dangerous historical mistakes. Given that our scientific knowledge is still constantly changing as evidence and technology improve, what deeply held medical truth of today will future generations look back on and laugh at as a bizarre, outdated assumption?